Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? We're about to start our webinar. We just waited for 5 minutes more to see if more people showed up, but let's start. I am Deborah. I am the LIFE ResLand project manager, and I'd like to thank you for joining us today from all around the world. And to kickstart our webinar, I'm going to call our project coordinator, João Melo, to say some words to you, okay? So enjoy, and João, up to you.
Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our LIFE ResLand webinar. Thank you so much for attending, colleagues and friends. We are delighted to have you here today. So my name is João Melo, and I'm a coordinator of this LIFE project, ResLand, which focuses on enhancing the resilience of the Sintra Cascais Nature Park landscape to a more climate change adapted landscape, and also to helping to restore this natural process and promoting the role of herbivores in the ecosystem management. So by implementing a series of habitat management models, our project aims to reduce the wildfire risk and improve biodiversity and support long-term ecological and cultural sustainability. So today, we will explore the vital role of herbivores and the role they play in shaping the resilience of ecosystems, from rewilding efforts to their impacts on carbon, water, and fire dynamics. So this event will bring experts and colleagues from all around the world, and I have the pleasure to present you some of our colleagues who will speak here, Bruno Pinto and Bárbara Madeira, but also, and once more, thank you very much for your time, to Stefano, to Miguel, and to Ida, to give us their insights and their expertise in this topic that is very, very interesting for us, and in particular to share among colleagues in all Europe and also around the world this perspective of the role of herbivores in the landscape. In particular, during this period of wildfires all around, we saw the news yesterday in Spain, in Greece, in Turkey. Thank God, not so far in Portugal, but our perspective is we'll have a very, very difficult and hot summer. So how can we bring together science, knowledge, and expertise to try to tackle this matter? So thank you very much for your availability. This will be the program. So my kickoff words, and afterwards Bruno and Bárbara, then Stefano, then Miguel, then Eda. In the end, we'll have a period of questions. For that purpose, we'll have a Slido. You can use your phone, and the idea is during the presentations, you can put your questions to the speakers on this Slido. And if you don't have a question, you can vote for a topic that you also intend it's the most interesting. And at the end, we will ask the speakers to give their opinion or complement their questions. So if you are not able to use the QR code, you can also go to Slido and put the password that will also link to that. So I wish you a pleasant conversation, and thank you very much for the team and Deborah to put this all together, and the rest of the colleagues. So let's start, Deborah. I give you the floor. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Bruno Pinto, and I'm a team member of LIFE ResLand, and I'm the project manager for the functional herbivore plant. That is the project I'm going to speak to you about today. The intervention area for this project is situated in the Sintra Cascais Natural Park in the area of Cascais municipality. This project resulted from the landscape plan that occurred due to a huge fire that we had in the October 2018 that consumed 500 hectares, and it was a project. It was developed to create a more resilient wildlife mosaic landscape. This project combines 4 coordinated strategies: the functional herbivory plan, that is one that I'm presenting today, prescribed fire, mechanical and motor manual intervention, and the traditional extensive agriculture. In this slide, you can see the timeline sequence of strategies. When we start the plot by doing the motor manual and mechanical intervention. In the next year, we do the introduction of the domestic breeds. The following year, we introduce the wildlife species, the roe deer and the red deer. And then in the 4th year, we will just leave the wildlife species, and the cycles will go on similar for other plots with different year stages. The objectives of this project is to contribute to a more resilient landscape to wildfires. The return to nature is capability of self-regulation of the ecosystem and all the ecosystem service that the mega herbivory generates, to enhance biodiversity, to mitigate the risks of depletion of natural resources by overgrazing, also to mitigate the risks of for visitors and animals, as well for people and goods in the surrounding community of the enclosures that we manage, to increase the attractivities of visitors for the areas that Cascais Ambiente manages, and to promote the preservation of domestic biodiversity, our native Portuguese breeds that we apply. In this slide, you can see some drawings by Art Nature that illustrates the ecosystem service that the mega herbivores promote, with the animal corpse that they left in the field, and for the food chain and the nutrients to come back to the soil, the forest dynamics with the regressions and all the cycles that they promote, the soil disturbance provoked by the mega herbivory, and also the cycle that the animal poo and dead wood evolved with the food chain and the nutrient cycles. The concept of this project is to use the mega herbivore as landscape management tools. They work as landscape architects. They shape the structure and composition of the flora according to the feeding profile of the herbivores. That they can be grazers, intermediate feeders, or browsers. This plan takes into account the current and historical regional fauna composition, and we do a definition of a diverse composition of herbivores with different feeding profiles to promote heterogeneous grazing and to avoid excessive pressure on certain species with interest for conservation, and also the species densities and the feeding profiles it should be appropriated to the project's objectives and the carrying capacity of the ecosystem that we are working. In this slide, you can see the 3 spots we used with the historical mega herbivore records to do the composition of the herbivores. And for that, we used in Cascais, in Porto Covo, that is situated in Quinta do Pisão, is where we have one of the enclosures. This Porto Covo Cave, the Salema Square in the nearby municipality, Lourdes, and Figueira Brava Cave in the Serra da Rábida Natural Park. All of these 3 areas are limestone areas. In this slide, you can see that from Porto Covo Cave, we had records from the Superior Pleistocene for the wild horse and the auroch. From the Holocene, we found records for the red deer and for the roe deer. In Figueira Brava Cave, we found records from the Superior Pleistocene and Holocene for the Iberian ibex. And finally, from the Salema Square, we found records from the Iberian wild ass, the zebra. That is a Portuguese word that gave name for the African zebras. Here, with the records that we showed, we created a mega herbivore historical regional composition and that is with the browser Rodeer, that is presently extinct species for 500 years, and we are now having a reintroduction project ongoing. As between a browser and intermediate feeder, we have the wild boar that was also locally extinct, but in the last decade it returned to the to the natural park. And we have as intermediate feeders the red deer that also locally extinct and with a reintroduction project ongoing, and the Iberian ibex. For the Iberian ibex, we are using a proxy that is the local autochthonous breed that is called Serrana goat, phenotype Ribetejana, and we are also ongoing with study of the possible reintroduction of this wild species. For grazers, we are using for the zebra a proxy, the Miranda donkey, that we consider to be an intermediate between grazer and an intermediate feeder. For the wild horses, we are using two autochthonous breeds. For the lowlands, we are using the Surraia, that is a primitive type breed. And for the highlands, we are using a Garrano, that is a mountain breed, a Portuguese mountain breed. And for the Auroch, we are using as a proxy the Maronesa, a mountain breed that we also consider feeding profile between grazer and intermediate feeder. For this next slide, we have a map of our intervention area with the two red circles. It's our two enclosures. In the bottom right corner, we have Quinta do Pisão. That is enclosure that is situated in the limestone plateau in the base of Serra de Sintra Hills with 240 hectares. And there we introduced the Surraia horse, the Miranda donkey, the goats, the red deer, and the roe deer. And we have present there 3 wild species: the wild boar that returned recently, the wild rabbit that has a population in regression, and also they came just last year, the red squirrel. And we have the Peninha that is situated in the west point of the hill of Serra de Sintra, nearby the Atlantic Ocean, and with 58 hectares. And there we introduced the Maronesa and the Garrano horse, and we have the presence of the wildlife for the wild boar and the wild rabbit. And we have in the blue circles, we have the three other areas that we are studying for new projects with different herbivores composition, as you can see. In this slide, you can see that for Quinta do Pisão, our flora target species is a Caranus oak. And for that, we are using the trampling effect by the 3 larger mega herbivores that we have: the donkey, the deer, and the wild boar, and forgot to put there the Surraia horse. And for the consumption of the aerial part and these shots, we all the species except the Surraia horse. And for the acorns, also the wild deer, the donkey, wild boar, goats, and the roe deer. We don't have the confirmation, but we are going to do a study this next fall to confirm that they can consume the acorns. For the Peninha enclosure, the target species is the Portuguese gorse. The trampling is made by the 3 present species, and for the consumption of the aerial part and shots, the horse and the cow. Now speaking about specifically for each species, the red deer, we are using the Iberian red deer that came from Herdade da Brava in Alentejo, Mértola. And the red deer and the roe deer were introduced with the license for educational purpose, and that has a problem that we can't do culling. We can't shoot the animals to do control of densities. The initial number of the introduction was 11 animals. Presently, we have 13, and we have a maximum license number of 35 individuals. In this image, we have an illustration done by Jeroen from Arc Nature, that you can see the ecosystem service that this mega herbivore do on their habitat. For the roe deer, they also introduced in the Quinta do Pisão with a number of 4. Presently, we have 5. In October, we are we are planning to do the introduction of another 24 individuals, and we can go to a maximum licensed number of 35 individuals. For the Iberian hare, as for the wild rabbit, we have a license to detention in a breeding center of 45 individuals. We have 9 presently, and we can then release them in the wild and not in an enclosure situation in the future. For the Maronesa cow, we had an initial number, and the present number is 6 individuals. We have an estimated density of 10 animals per square kilometer, and we are updating this density to probably to go to a higher level, but we are studying impact on the vegetation. And they also consume acacia. That is a very good evidence for us for the mega herbivore pressure that they do. In this slide, we can see also illustration of the ecosystem service that this proxy breed do to their habitat. For the Cajano horse, we introduced also in the Peninha 5 animals. Presently, we have 12 with an estimated density of 40 animals per square kilometer, and we are updating for a higher value in the future. For the Soraya horse, it is a primitive type of breed. We started with 7. The actual number is 19. We have an estimated density of 8 animals per square kilometer, and we are updating to lower that value because the animals have problems in the summer due to the lack of food for them, appropriate lack of food for them, because they only goes for meadows and pastures, and they don't go to shrubland. That is the larger part of this enclosure. In this image, you can see the ecosystem service that this proxy breed due to their ecosystem, also image from Art Nature. And the Miranda donkey was the first breed, a species that we introduced in our enclosures. We started with a 30 and we maintained that number. We don't have the stallion there presently. And we consider to have a profile between grazer and intermediate consumer. They're very smart animals that they open the path through the shrublands, and the Sorayas follow them. And they are a very good tool for the type of ecosystem that we have in Quinta do Pisão. For last, we have the Serrana goats, phenotype Ribatejana. We don't use them in an extensive grazing model. We use them for a short-term intensive grazing in mobile electric fences in small areas between 1 hectare to 3 hectares. And we move them between in the winter and fall in Quinta do Pisão, and they go to the cliff valleys in spring and summer to consume all the vegetation in the top of the hills to reduce the risk of fire propagation. We start with the number of 30. Now we intend to go to 150, but we are having problems to find herds with enough number to buy the remaining that we want. Now we are going to speak to you about the challenges and strategies that we have in the management of the enclosures and for the species. One of the challenges we have is the dogs. For the visitors that come with dogs off leash that cause disturbance to the wildlife, and for that we intend to do educational campaigns. The other situation, and more dramatic, is the feral dogs that enter the enclosure and attack livestock and wildlife. And for that, we need to organize action to capture the dogs and try to identify the possible owners. For the visitors, we have the challenge that the unauthorized feeding, with possible consequences for the visitors and also for the animal health, and the visit that they ignore the minimum safety distance, the 30 meters distance. And for that, we are doing educational campaigns. And the 2 main problems is the vandalism and the wildfires. The vandalism, we had a lot of situations that the person cut off the fences, and the problem of the animals could escape. And for that, we are increasing the municipal police patrols, and we are also studying the possibility of video surveillance system. the wildfire is a major problem, and it's the situation, how can we ensure the animal safety in this situation? And for that, we are establishing a evacuation procedure checklist. It's very important to know how to act in an emergency situation. Another challenge is density control of the both synergetic species that we talk about, the red deer and roe deer. We come to the culling, and for that, we need to do capture events. We have never done it, or after capture, we can do the slaughter if it's made by a veterinarian. Another challenge is the low survival of farms or offsprings for the roe deer and for the goats due to the natural predation by foxes or eagle owl or Egyptian mongoose if they are in small enclosures. And for that, we consider that the roe deer can only be only a good option for large enclosures or the reintroduction in the wild. And we are doing a project to reintroduce the roe deer in this natural park. For the goats, we are planning to. We are at the moment in putting adult livestock guardian dogs and invest in the education of their puppies. Also, we are considering the possibility of incorporating a shepherd. Another huge risk is the possibility of the animals attacking the visitors and their dogs, and that could be done by cows in the period with the calves or stags during the rut in the fall. And for that, we are doing educational campaigns. Another problem is the sensitivity of some species for the transportation process, and that's mainly for the roe deer. And for that, we made specific transportation boxes for the roe deers with 2 entrances. They are ventilated, and they don't allow the animals to rotate inside, and also to do use certified transport vehicles without exposure to sunlight. Another situation is the consanguinity management, and mainly for the Soraya horse, that is a primitive breed with 44% of consanguinity, and also applies to red deer and Garrano and Maronesas. And for that, we are doing genetic improvement plans with the local association, with the breeds association, and we are promoting the exchange and sales of animals between breeders. Now we are doing the change of one of the Soraya stallions with Pudleria adultère. Also, another challenge is the annual veterinary inspection that we need by law to do for the cows. And we have 2 problems with the Sorayas. We need to do supplementation during the summer because they only move between meadows and pastures, and for that we are thinking about reducing the densities from 1 animal per 10 hectares to 1 animal per 15 hectares. And also, it's considered not to be a good solution to use this breed in poor soils with the predominance of scrubland and forests. And also for the Soraya, due to the low dispersion in the enclosure that is mainly dominated by Kermes oak scrubland, we are creating new open areas, cutting some patches of Kermes oak. We have the challenge also for the hares and the wild rabbits, and for that we are using for our breeding center that we are building at the moment to use only vaccinated animals with high levels of immunity. We are also finding difficulty to find breeders for the hares, rabbits, and goats. The goats we need herds with the dimension that we need, and for that we are looking for new solutions and to invest in our partnership with the Goats Breeding Association. And for last, the wild boar, a native present wildlife species, and the conflicts that can create with the local community. We don't have a lot of problems, only they cause problems in the golf courses the night after it rains, and they do a culling that they are authorized by ECNF. And they also can do problems to the destruction of property, crops, gardens, and road accidents. And for that, we are developing a culling plan and we are already installing all the roads, the municipal roads of the natural park warning road signs. And my presentation is finished. I hope you like it. And now I'm going to pass to my colleague, Barbara. Thank you very much.
So, Barbara, up to you now.
Hello, let me just share my screen. Okay. Everybody seeing it?
Yeah.
Barbara.
Yeah? Okay. So I'll be talking to you about my work monitoring the animals. As my colleague said, these animals are very important to controlling the vegetation, but we need to ensure that we're doing the right job, and if they are in perfect conditions to do so. And that's where I enter. I monitor herds from 5 different species, including 2 notable Portuguese breeds. Among them, the Soraya stands out due to this remarkable resilience and its significantly conservation value, as my colleague already said. These breeds exhibit primitive phenotypic traits, such as dorsal stripe, zebra stripe on the legs, dark muzzle, and a bicolored mane. These features reminiscent of primitive horses. The Soraya is maintaining by a critical low effective population size, and this, as my colleague Bruno said, is raising concerns about this genetic diversity and the long-term viability. So we are managing this very carefully to ensure the health of all the animals. Represented in the dark yellow is our study area. It has 3 enclosures. It's located in Peninha and Quinta do Pisão. Peninha is part of Sintra Mountain, and you can find it at the top left of the map. Quinta do Pisão is divided by a main road, and because of that, we'll refer it to as Quinta do Pisão North, where you can find Soraya horses, roe deer, and donkeys, and Quinta do Pisão South, where you can find the red deer and the other herd of Soraya. The monitoring of these animals is done with the help of several equipments and direct observation, normally by me or by the rangers. There are easy animals to spot and more difficult ones. So I must follow tracks and patterns to find them. I use binoculars during the day and the ocular of pulsar that have night vision more at the crepuscular hours, allowing me to observe the animals from a considerable distance. I also use a camera trap to help us get close to the more elusive species like the roe deer and the red deer. Usually I carry a photograph camera to register anything that I find curious, or a specific behavior, a mating behavior, anything that help us also study and find curious. The equids and cows have a GPS collar from a Digitanimal application and program that sends their location to the application 30 to 30 minutes at a time. This makes it easy to find the animals, and also the collar sends us notifications if the animal is leaving the enclosure, if their body temperature drops, or they are not moving for some time. Well, we need to receive these notifications and act on it. We collect the GPS data and analyze the movement patterns, but I'll talk about this further ahead. Okay, after finding them, I need to know who's who. And for that, I photograph specific features of each animal to achieve effective individual identification. This helps us to know if some animal is sick, which animal we need to treat. Some are easy, some are difficult to identify. Some horses have hot brandings, but the ones that don't, we use normally zebra stripes if possible. Roe deer, we use the anal turf, It's that white spot on their anal area. And red deers, they have a subtle line running along the neck. And this line have some changes, as you can see in the photos, but it's also difficult. You need to be on the right position. The camera needs to be in the right position. And both the anal turf and this line vary seasonally, so the identification needs to be done regularly. They also have, the deer also have ear tags, but as you can see, some are the same color. At night, it's impossible. And so it's very difficult to see the numbers written on them. So I focus more on the line. Well, then I register in an etogram the animal and the herd behavior. Observation distance are species specific to minimize anthropogenic interference. And for equids, including horses and donkeys, usually I typically conduct approximate distance of 10 meters. However, sometimes the animals approach, especially the donkeys, and I need to adjust the range for the animal to show natural responses and maintain natural behavior. Well, in contrast, in the surveyed species, we will require significantly greater distance because they will run if they see you. So they have a lot of sensibility to human presence and smell. The observational protocol involves dividing each day into 6 different periods. This has, we want to analyze 1 hour of behavior analysis per period. We usually give a 15 minutes acclimatization period to animals know the presence of the observer, but they are comfortable with it. This schedule is implemented in at least 2 months in each season, enabling a comprehensive assessment of the activity patterns across both diurnal and seasonal cycles. This approach accounts the potential behavior variability by seasonal and environmental factors, and that's important because, as you know, animals change the behavior along the year. Also, I forgot to tell you back there, I do a well-being and physical health monitoring to ensure animals are in good health. As Bruno said, in summer, sorayas suffer a little bit more, and to see if there are any pregnant females, and to have a register documentation for the future. Okay. In these observations, we can see when they rest, when they play, when they do all their behaviors, and more important, what and where they eat. Maintaining a social balance. We have both males and females in the enclosure. It's essential for their well-being and for preserving natural behaviors. Herd individuals form strong social bonds, especially in donkeys and in horses, and they communicate, they raise the young in stable environment, and these interactions support the mental health, reduce stress, allows them for express instinctive behaviors like grooming and playing and interactions, mating. So this is a healthy social dynamics, and that's what we want to contribute to a more natural grazing pattern. It will help maintain ecological balance in the landscape. So it's very important. So let's talk about results. We expect the strategy implemented within the enclosure allows us for the restoration and preservation of habitats, recover the mosaic landscape, produce organic farming activity, and an increase in territorial biodiversity, even in a urban area like this one. As I said earlier, you can collect digital animal data to analyze movement patterns. So here we have heat maps that represent the movement of our donkeys and horses in 2024. As you can see, the donkeys have a greater distribution on the map, where the limiting factors for movement are terrain, slope, and physical. You're not hearing me? Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
we can. Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Very well.
okay. Sorry. So as I was saying, the donkeys have a greater distribution, and mainly because they don't move in herds. So they move by pairs or, well, the most likely friendship movement instead of a herd movement. While the horses are more oriented to stay near water and pastures, and they move as a herd. And the amount of pressure on the vegetation of on these zones is very high. And this helps us to study their impact on a specific zone. If there are species that we want to protect, if there are excessive trampling, that we can compact the soil or damage the vegetation. And if so, what can we do? First, we can move our water tank to different areas to see if they go to the new zones, create more pastures in different places with the help of controlled fire, and isolate the critical areas. So let's just pass the slide, please. Sorry. I saw what I saw about the herd's feeding habits, as you can see in the main table, corresponds with the species herbivory profile. Red deer are eating reasonable amount of Quercus crucifera. Surraia are also eating Oleoropea silvestris and Hamnus. Cows are eating Acacia, Rubus, and Citisus striatus. Garranos are eating also acacia leaves. And the curious thing about the garranos is that sometimes I saw all the horses, like all the individuals, eating the same thing in an area, and the next day I'll go and they are in another different area and also eating a different thing, but all the horses. Usually that's not what happens. Usually one individual is eating something and the other individual is eating another thing. But this is curious because I saw it several times in Garranos horses. So this is fine. Another curiosity, we don't deworm our animals. But the horses have a strategy to do that by a natural way. They will eat thorny leaves, from Quercus crucifera, for example, and they compact parasites. So if they are eating a lot of these thorny leaves, we know that they have a lot of parasites. We don't intervene unless it's messing with their health. Next slide, please. Okay. Grazed areas show great plant species richness, and more trails and more broken branches. Usually this happens by animals scratching themselves or playing with each other, but this is not necessarily a bad thing. Opening new trails can open pathways to other animals to move around. It can open pastures, meadows, where several animals could eat or be eaten, because like all the animals are in fenced areas, we need to be careful of the number of animals and for controlling this damage, but otherwise it's not that bad. Next slide. So what do we aim in the future? Next. Yeah, first we will start using a night vision drone to monitoring roe and red deer. We expect this will be an improvement of our detection of the species, and even we can zoom in on what animals are eating. So this is going to be a great impact on us, and it's almost implemented in our team, the drone. We will do a linear transect conducted randomly along the trails, recording all present signs and traces. Here is more for a biodiversity study. We will count the number of new trails to see the impact the horses and all the animals are doing, and the vegetation, and how many kilograms of dung are produced in the area, sampling of insects that visit that dung, and seed dispersal transported by animal fur. Here we will probably use the donkeys because they have a lot of fur, especially in winter, and we can brush them because they are very friendly. It's very difficult to approach a horse and brush him, so we'll probably opt for the donkeys. Next slide. Okay. This is our offspring from this year. Since there are more. Since the beginning of our project at Quinta do Pisão, we have witnessed the birth of 11 Soraya horses, 2 red deer, 5 roe deer, and at Peninha, 1 Moronese cow and 8 Carrano horses. This safe, enriched, and species-appropriate environment supports natural behaviors, and this includes mating and parenting behaviors. That's why I register all. Animals need to express natural mating behaviors, and if the area, the enclosure, and the habitat restricts this, the reproduction may fall, and this is a good indicator of the health of our herds. And that's it. Thank you. I'll leave you with a small video of a fawn. And I'm sorry once again for the technical problems.
Thank you, Barbara. It's okay. It's not your fault. It happens. Everyone knows that. So thank you to Barbara and to Bruno for showing everybody what we're doing in the LIFE ResLand project. And now we are delighted to welcome Stefano. He's from the Italian National Research Council, and today he will be talking to us about rewilding megafauna and the long-term sustainability of cultural landscapes. Is it right, Stefano?
Thank you. I'm trying to share my
screen. Can you share your screen?
Yes, I'm trying to do so.
Wonderful. So the floor is yours.
Do you see the presentation now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Sorry, we go here. Okay, we are at the beginning. As you mentioned, thank you very much for the invitation. First of all, it's a very interesting workshop here, and where we can present that is our first result about a sort of theory of rewilding, if you want to say something like that. Indeed, I am working in Institute of Physics, Institute of Complex System, and for sure ecosystem are complex system, but we are mainly interested in theory. So I hope it shall not be too much boring for you, this story. I have worked a lot with wildlife, especially with ungulates. I have done movement ecology of ungulates. And after I concentrated my attention on population assessment, monitoring of population. But now I little bit shifted to this very interesting story about rewilding. I work with a small group of people, mainly from the University of Rome, about this Italian rewilding, if you wish. Let me start with some theory about the extinction, the big extinction of megafauna between the Pleistocene and the Holocene, more or less 2,000 to 12,000 years ago. It is clear that the extinction rate was very high in many continents. It was enormous in the Americas. It was very high in Asia, very high, enormous in Australia. Australia was the most affected place in the heart. And it was very relatively small and not really relevant in Africa. So there is some geographical differences. Europe and Asia at a medium level, Africa, low level, the Americas and Australia, very high level. And these extinctions, Pleistocene, Holocene extinction, is size biased in the sense that the big species are much more affected than small species. You can see from the first graph, no? And you have a very small number, very small percentage of extinction in small species and very huge in large species. Let me make some theory about what happens in the Pleistocene Holocene interface. This is a situation, is a representation, is graphic representation of the situation in the late Pleistocene. The graph here is a representation of the Amian situation. The Amian is interglacial between Ras and Würm, and it is comparable to our climatic situation now in Europe. You see there was a lot of big animals there. The landscape was dominated by the mammoth steppe. Mammoth steppe, here is a picture from the Altai region, whereas mammoth steppe is a stable ecosystem, one of the last place where you can see something like that. And it was a prairie, sort of savanna, composed by forbs and graminoids. And it should, in spring, it should be a very nice place, full of flowers and so on. And this ecosystem does not exist in Europe alone. It exists because of the presence of large grazers. What happens in the interface between Pleistocene and Holocene? People increase of numbers and grazing start to decrease because many animals were killed by humans. So you see this trajectory of decreasing grazing, decreasing grazing. When the grazing decreases, this environment cannot be maintained because it starts to develop trees and shrubs. So the amount of food for large mammals decreases even more. At a certain point, there is a critical point, threshold point, where the system enters in unstable state, this dotted one, and it moves to a situation where most of the animals disappear. What happened is we move from this situation to this situation. In cold climate, it was taiga, which very poor, is not able to sustain large mammals, or to tundra, or to taiga, the forest, coniferous forest. Coniferous is very poor, so the amount of large animals which can stay in a taiga is very small, and so the number of species and the density of species decreased very much. This was a double effect: is self-amplification of the system. Hunting start to develop, changing the environment, decrease the number of large animals. Decreasing the large animals increases the disappearance of the mammoth steppe, and so on in the amplification of self-extinction. So basically, it's a vortex of is big scale vortex of extinction here. What happened? It is that a fishery, Daniel Pauly, have defined this term as the shifting baseline syndrome. What is a shifting baseline syndrome? Is that conceptually we are able to consider natural what we know well, what we have seen our fathers, what we have seen when we are young, and so on. We have a clear idea about what was before. And this shifting baseline syndrome is also integrated in our legal system. The different laws about natural protection, habitat directive, and so this kind of stuff are based on the conservation of what it exists. As it was a true natural situation, but there is no idea that the situation could be quite different. We have lost of memory about that. And this is clearly a human cognitive bias. We are not able to keep memory of what was before. And when we have in the mythology, the monsters like the Nemea lion killed by Hercules, is a souvenir. This kind of monster, dragons, this kind of stuff are probably the souvenirs of a lost past, but maintained only in the mythology. By the way, at the time of Bronze Age, when Hercules was working, as we know that lions was present in all the Balkans at the time. Okay, but we have some picture what situation must be. This is a painting from Lascaux Cave. Lascaux Cave is about 12,000 years ago, so it's an interface between Pleistocene and Holocene, and these people give us a picture. This is the situation. We have aurochs, we have deer mixed together, we have wild horses, very well represented. So they give us a picture of what should be the situation. This thanks to these painters, because they were very, very clever. People are not in generally aware. Can I cancel or hide? Okay, I can shift here. So because I have, I minimize. Sorry, a moment. Okay. We have lost our understanding that we are responsible for a wave of extinction around the globe 10,000 years ago. We, through Borst, make a very good paper saying that our legislation is affected by amnesia and myopia. They are not able to understand that what we have now are not natural ecosystems. In fact, natural is the true sense of the word. Indeed, the restoration should be something like when we make a restoration of an old paintings. The guy who makes the restoration of old paints wants to show you something which is as close as possible to the original painting and eliminate all the stuff which is are not appropriate. And this should be also the restoration of habitats, to come back as much as possible to the old ecosystem, and especially to maintain and to conserve the natural function, which are the ecosystem service, which are the service we are interested in our own interest to maintain. For instance, biodiversity conservation, for instance, carbon sequestration, and so forth. And several scholars, of course, the discussion is very, very open, have set this benchmark, because a benchmark must be fixed somewhere, before significant anthropogenic impacts of humans to the ecosystem. So I think that the interface between Pleistocene and Holocene can be the good reference point, but this is, of course, is something to be discussed, if it is feasible. Just to give you an idea about Italy in the onset of the Holocene. We have a mixed ecosystem with trees, wood. We have many open areas. In open areas there were European wild asses, Equus idruntinus, which was cited before. Idruntinus means which come from the Apulia region in Italy, by the way. Aurochs is a picture here. And all these, and a number of bird of prey, vulture, which of course forage on carcasses. So we have a large amount of production of carcasses, like here, which were consumed by scavengers, by the wolves, of course, and after they provide soil organic matter. Soil organic matter come from dungs, come from carcasses, come from the root exudation in the steppe. The grasses produce this root exudation, and part of this carbon, which arrives to the soil, is sequestrated under the form of mineral-associated organic matter, which is a stable way to storage, to sequestrate carbon. Because the other big way to sequestrate carbons, it is wood storage. But wood storage, maybe I make a mistake, is for the right storage. as I was mentioned before, our subjects are vulnerable to wildfire. So a forest can be destroyed in a few hours, in a few days, and an enormous amount of carbon are emitted in the atmosphere, which is not a good thing. While mineral-associated organic matter are stored in the soil can last thousands of years. So to have open areas is not only important for biodiversity, there are many examples of that, but also important to stock carbon. We need a lot of that. What about the situation of big animals in Italy, more or less in the Holocene? Here's the brown bear. The brown bear was present everywhere, as well as the lynx, the yellow dot as the lynx were present in the north, in the south, even during a relatively recent past. We know from a historical record that the lynx were common in the Alps until the past century, so it's not a strange thing. What is a little bit strange is that which lynx we have, because there are paleontological surveys showing that in the south of Italy there was a pardine lynx indeed. But these pardine lynx were very big. It's not like the lynx you have in Iberia, probably in Portugal as well, which are 10 or 12 kilograms animals. Lynx in Italy were 25 kilograms, very big lynx, in fact. And a large number of bears. This picture here, it is obtained from zootoponyms. In the last 500 years, you see we have a concentration of bears in the north, as now, in the central Italy, as now, and there was another hotspot in the northern Apennines as well, which now is extinct. There are no more bears here. Oh, this is the situation of grazers. 3 species of grazers, the auroch, the wild horse, and especially very common in the south, the Equus hydruntinus. Sorry, in Italian, there are in Italian, but is a wild European wild ass, which is a species very, very close to the Asian wild ass. Probably the same species, 2 different subspecies. They are very, very close. Some example of rewilding, some which can teach us something. I have put here the Serengeti because of wildfires. You have quoted a lot about wildfires before. And in Serengeti, in fact, the return of Condocaetes taurinus, the wild beast, was shown to decrease the number of wildfires with respect to the previous time. We have 2 effective rewilding areas, which are the Pleistocene Park in Siberia and this, I am not able to pronounce, Oostvaardenplassen in the Netherlands. The Oostvaardenplassen was made by using a reserve, reclaimed the lands from the sea, and Franz Vera, who pioneered much of this story, asked to put wild between inverted commas animals in this place. They put red deer, sort of cows, cattle, and horses, and so on. But this is interesting because it was a failure. This project became a failure because people start to see animals dying. There was some mass dying in this island, and they say, no, we have to give food to this animal. It's cruel, it's terrible, but to give food and so on and so on. And so this experiment to understand what is the natural equilibrium. The natural equilibrium was a failing. Was failed. This now is not more important. What is going on, for what I know, because information from Russia are not very easy to obtain at this moment, it is the Pleistocene Park. Pleistocene Park is here. You see this place here. in area, it is a reddish area, where there is a lot of permafrost. There are tens of meters of permafrost below the soil. Just to make you an idea about the total emission of carbons from the permafrost, it is for each year about 1/2, almost 50% of the total emission from fossil fuels. The amount of carbon which is liberated by the thawing of the permafrost is very, very high, and it is very, very dangerous. What Zimov and his colleagues have done, it is to try to use megafaunal engineering to reduce permafrost thaw, melting of permafrost. Just to give you an idea about the numbers, in the Pleistocene, in this place, there were 1 mammoth, 5 bison, 7.5 horses, and 15 reindeer per square kilometer. These are estimations, of course. Nobody was there to count, but so it is clear that this mechanism work only if the densities are very high. You need many species and large densities, because with few animals, 10 animals, 20 animals, you do nothing. You cannot make any kind of engineering. In fact, I'm working, sometimes I work in Africa, and there are huge amount of animals, which maintains, and despite there is a forest, despite everything, there is no danger for the forest by the presence of large mammals, provided you have predators, because the predators are a fundamental elements of the equilibria between the grazers and forest. If you have predators, in Africa it doesn't missing leopard, you have what you want, lions and so on, the hyenas and so forth. You can have forest as well as shrub areas, depending on the climate, in fact. But it's important that you need a very, very large density of grazers. Mechanisms are albedo, increase of albedo, so relative cooling of the soil, the stamping by ungulates, the mechanical stamping of ungulates reduce warming of the soil. It conserves permafrost. Sorry. Mosses are very dangerous for the permafrost because they are very wet, and the water inside the mosses increases the melting of the permafrost, while graminoids dry up the soil, and so the melting is reduced. And of course, the sequestration of carbon by forbs and graminoids is much, much higher than of mosses. There are in Italy rewilding opportunities in Italy and Europe, yes. Rewilding opportunities are given by the abandonment of the farmlands. In Italy, for instance, especially in southern and central Italy, most of the farmers in the hills, in the Apennines, have been left, abandoned, because they are not economically viable. So this is a very great opportunity for rewilding. What you do with this soil? Only to allow the wood to encroach these old fields, or it is better to put wild animals which maintain the open areas and maintain the ecosystem healthy? This is a question. There are a number of possible important ecological impact as to reduce biodiversity decline. If you have even coverage of the soil by forest, you have less and less biodiversity. You have mixed habitats patches, you have biodiversity increase. You lost the traditional landscape we have in Italy. We have reduced the availability of water. We increase the soil erosion. We have a number of problems, all linked to the problem of homogenization. And we have also social-cultural impact. People leave the forest, leave the mountains. Tradition and products and so on are lost. While rewilding can help to maintain a viable human population there. This is a more specific map, not very clear, probably. We're showing the opportunities for rewilding in Italy. There is a paper about that. And in fact, these opportunities demonstrated by the recent return of wildlife spontaneously. Wolf, red deer, roe deer, wild boar, of course, they are everywhere now. So so we can try to favor this natural process. In fact, we have the golden jackals coming again, the beaver, the European beaver, and so on. There are some European regulation, which can help. Nature restoration regulation, quite recent in the past year, establishes a benchmark for degraded ecosystem to be restored. So this can be a very big opportunity for rewilding. This also deal with biodiversity strategy, with the European climate law. We have seen that we can use rewilding to reduce greenhouse emission, better, to increase greenhouse gases sequestration. The common agricultural policy can give help, economic help, and maybe in some case, but we will see later, even the Habitat Directive, which is in fact very limited in aim for rewilding. Oh, but what we put for the extinguished species? Consider that in Italy we haven't had not too much extinction in the Holocene, Pleistocene period, but we have extinction of wild ass, basically, the wild horse and the aurok. What do we put there? By the way, the name Italy comes from a very old word, which means, in fact, cattle. It seems at the time cattle was very common in Italy, even it remains the name of Italy. We can put Taurus instead of the Auroch, Przewalski horses for the feral horse, or the other wild ass. This is a discussion to be done. I have not completely clear ideas about that, but we have only the chance to use proxies. But I must say I don't like very much to put proxy in a ranch, in a fenced area, and to keep them like more or less like domestic animals. If we want to make some rewilding, we need to have really wild animals, which are subject to predation, which can move freely, which can migrate, and all like that. Because only these components, migration, predation, and so on, cooperation, facilitation, grazing facilitation between, for instance, cattle and horses, is important to maintain a healthy ecosystem. Only one part of that process is not enough for me. And what we do with links? This is a problem. I have no. Can we introduce European links in the Apennines? The question is open to discussion, of course. We have seen before rewilding is especially the specific importance of trophic rewilding. Rewilding based on the trophic web inside the ecosystem. In general, all the trophic web, the whole trophic web, as I mentioned before. We have a number of benefits from rewilding, including very important for the development of forest is a zoochory seed dispersal. Now there are a lot of legal issues. I am not an advocate, not an expert in legislation, but legal questions, legal issues are very important. The introduction with proxies may face, given the actual legal system, a number of problems linked to the veterinary rules, husbandry public liability rules, which are basically designed for domestic animals. Domestic animals have to be marked with ear tags, must be vaccinated, must be checked for the health. These are not wild animals, in fact, because if you have to do all this kind of stuff, There are no more wild animals. And the problem is that this kind of request reduce the potential ecological meaning of the wild animals. One for all, wild animal die, the carcass is consumed by vultures. But if it is a domestic animal, the carcass must be removed. So the vulture cannot exist anymore. In fact, the vulture are more or less initiated, except the Geppetto, are basically artificially fed, artificially fed, which is not a good thing for me. Even use of proxies or use of, for instance, the example of Asian wild ass, can encounter the rules against the introduction of alien species. And this was, the subspecies are exempt or not by the alien species regulation is a question. In the use of African cheetahs to reintroduction in India has created a very huge amount of legal problem, and the Supreme Court of India make a lot of sentences about that. This was really a nightmare for that. The other directive is applied only to the species which are now present in the European Union, and especially to the species which are listed in the annexes. So for new animals, they are not applicable. So this creates some problem as well. Indeed, if you reintroduce an unlisted species near or within a Nature 2000 area site, which is probably the best place where to do so, there are problems about the conservation of the site, because, for instance, of disease or other problems with a new species. We have a number of legal problems to be solved. What we will do, we will need in Europe, it is to have a special legislation for rewilding, because for now it is very critical. And there are also ecological criticalities. This paper, I think by a Spanish guy, Daniel Sieberloff, say that we have to pay attention to rewilding conservation. This can be a problem. First question, the species you use might be fine in itself, so it's good species, but its habitat is vanished long time ago, so we cannot make their introduction simply because we have no more habitat. This is true for many species. Many species need the habitat, but large grazers, large mammals, they produce, as we have seen before, they create their own environment. So we need to start from a place where there is some good condition, and after the animals will develop, creating and developing their own environment. The species absent for thousands of years can destabilize the modern ecosystem. This is what happens when you put an alien species in the ecosystem. The ecosystem can be destabilized because the ecosystem does not know, between inverted commas, a new species. But in fact, ecosystems are characterized by a true long, contrary to the people, they are characterized by a long memory. For instance, the honey locust in the United States, in America, it is acacia, and these trees present thorns in the branches 3 meters height. It is what is the meaning of the thorn 3 meter height? Simply because the honey locust remember the time where mammoths depredate their branches. So many plants or animals own yet the feature, the character, which makes them living in a completely different environment. There is a sort of ecological memory in this system. The other problem are the social problems. In Italy, there are serious problems of coexistence between large mammals and humans, especially in rural communities. For instance, crop damages, livestock depredation by wolves and lynx and bear, car crashes for everybody, of course. It can be dangerous, but it is affecting more people living in the countryside. And in some cases, we have had aggression by bears and wolves to humans and a lot of aggression to pets. So people are not happy about the presence of these animals. But what I want to say is we want to conserve nature around the world or not? Because we cannot make the poor people in the tropics, in Africa or in Asia, to pay the burden, to keep the burden of presence of harmful, dangerous large mammals. In Africa, I have seen ladies washing the, the dresses in the river where they are moving a hippopotami or they move the crocs. Normally, it doesn't happen anything, but it's potentially dangerous. As well in India, in the poor communities in India, leopards and wolves kill children. So everybody, I think, we cannot give the burden only to the poor people. In Italy, only to the people which stay in the mountains, which are less rich than the people in the town. This burden must be shared by every people because the advantages to rewilding are for everybody. We can conclude with George Monbiot words. We live in a shadowland, a dim, flattened relict of what there once was, of what there could be again. Thank you very much for your attention. Obrigado.
Thank you so much, Stefano. It was very interesting to watch your presentation. And I remind you once again, submit your questions in Slido. And if they're directed at a specific speaker, please state their name so that we know who to ask the question, okay? So now I call to the stage Miguel Bugalho. He's from the Center of Applied Ecology, Professor Baeta Neves, at the University of Lisbon, and he will talk to us about wild ungulates and how they influence ecosystem functioning. So, Miguel, it's up to you now.
Thank you. Are you listening me well?
Okay. Yeah.
So thank you for the invitation, particularly to João and Marlene. I'm very glad to be here discussing with you all these issues. And Stefan, which I've been reading you for some time. So, well, the talk is about the effects of deer on Mediterranean oak woodlands, particularly carbon, water, and fire. And basically is a synthesis of different works that we have been doing, our team has been doing for a long-term project nowadays. Very quickly, so I'll be revising the ruminant feeding strategy. So of course there are herbivores, but within herbivores we have the ruminants. And within the ruminants we have the different feeding strategies that Bruno and Barbara already mentioned. Of course, these are animals that eat plants, so they will be affecting plant species composition, plant community structure, plant productivity, and with that they will be affecting ecosystem functioning and follow up the services that ecosystem deliver. I will be illustrating these things with data from a long-term case study, and then a bit of conclusions and take-home message. So, as it has already been said here, we humans tend to classify the world. It's very important to classify and systematize the world in order to act. And of course, all the classifications can be criticized, but the one that you show in the screen is a very accepted one. So the browsers or the concentrate selectors, the grazers, the grass feeders, or the intermediate feeders. This was a classification proposed long ago by Reinus Hoffmann, a known animal ecophysiologist. And in a very simple and gross way, of course, the devil is always on the details. The browsers are those that eat over 75% of woody plants in their diet. The grazers include over 75% of grass species in their diet. And then we have these intermediate feeders with, as the name says, they have an intermediate strategy, changing from a woody diet composition for a grass dominant diet composition according to the season of the year and according to the food available, the plants that are available on the ground. So typically the red deer is an intermediate feeder. So for example, here in a photograph taken in evergreen oak woodland in southern Portugal, when the hot and dry summer arrives, and we can see that all the grasses are brown, senescent, and dead. So our grass species are mainly annual species. So when the summer arrives, they set seed and die. That's the way they survive the stressed and limited water season. When this happens, the ruminants move their foraging behavior to what is green, what is left green on the landscape. And this can be evergreen shrubs, such as the one you see on the backwards, or the tree canopies, where they are looking for the protein that is so much needed for a ruminant. So for maintaining their complex digestive system, they need at least 4% of protein in their diet, and they search for it on what remains green in the landscape. When autumn arrives, you have the first grass growing, and the animals again move the heads down and start grazing, and grazing becomes again the foraging dominant behavior. So typically it's an animal that changes between browsing and grazing according to food availability, according to season variability. So they have effects both on the grassland patches and of course on the woody species, such as this shrub that you see here, Cistus ladanifer, Steva, the rock rome gum cistus, and you clearly see the tips of the shrub have been cut off by these animals. So this is an index of shrub use and how the animals are using these plants in their habitats. And of course, so if they change the plant community, if they change the properties of the plant community, they will be affecting the ecosystem and the way the ecosystem functions. So our rationale for this project is very, very simple, not rocket science. So basically, you have different feeding strategies. With that, the animals will be affecting the vegetation in very different ways. And if they affect vegetation, they will affect other parameters such as microclimate, soil moisture, soil temperature, plant diversity. With that, functions as nutrient cycling, organic matter decomposition will be also affected. And of course, that will be influence the services that these ecosystems generate. And particularly here, I'll be speaking about carbon, wildfire hazard, and the water cycle. So this is a picture of the study area. This is a typical evergreen oak woodland that dominates southern Portugal, and in fact, in many regions of the Mediterranean basin. It's an enclosed area with over 1,200 hectares located in southern Portugal. So the main species, 3 species are the cork and holm oak, but then you have the community, a dominant community of these shrubs. Deer populations occur there. The densities vary along the year, so this is a touristic hunting zone, so the animals are hunted. The hunting pressure is relatively similar across years. Some years you have lower densities, the deers higher densities, and nowadays they have quite high stocking animal presence, which almost reach 1 deer per hectare. As I said before, the dominant shrub is what you see in the screen. So Cistus ladanifer, they tend to form these communities and these beautiful flowers. You can see here the buds. The buds will get into capsules, which have typical hundreds of very small and very resistant seeds that can spend large number of years with viable underneath the soil. And what is interesting is that the cistus can be used by the animals as a food source, particularly when the grass availability is low, but simultaneously these shrubs are also used by cover, which is such important parameter for wildlife management. So in specifically relation to this experiment, as I said, is a very long-term experiment. So in fact, it was my first research project in Portugal after arriving here with my PhD. So we were fortunate to get this funding from our Ministry of Science. And so what we proposed was to assess the effects of these wild ungulates on the ecosystem. So our very first questions indeed related to the effects of deer on oak regeneration, because these areas are reaching, for example, cork oak, and cork is a very economically important species. So you have different people, land managers that, of course, want to preserve the cork, but simultaneously in many areas, they have introduced the deer for hunting purposes, because this can be a very important income when agriculture is marginal in these areas. So you really need to find the balance between maintaining a viable deer population that can be hunted, but also the trade-offs that they may have by affecting oak woodland regeneration. I'm not showing those results here, so these are part of other questions of the project, but if you see the little white dots there, this means the little oak seedlings that we use to monitor as every 3 months when we go to the field. In this experiment that basically we set up 5 experimental plots that were fenced, 2 meters high fence for the deer not to enter, and they were paired with open plots, same size, where the deer can have their normal feeding activities. So any differences that you may find in the vegetation, height, biomass, species composition, we can be pretty sure that they are due to deer. Of course, we have also small mammals in the area, rabbits, hares, voles, but they all can pass the mesh size of this fence. So typically the effects that you may record are due to the deer presence, and more recently to the wild boar. So just very quickly overview of the methods. So we measure grassland diversity. We have been doing this annually for over 20 years now, basically using this pinpoint quadrant method, where you have these needles that record which species touch the needle, and with that you get the frequency of species, and you can get a very good overview on which species occur both in the fenced and the open plots. So both in the fence subject to animal grazing and browsing, and the fenced plots where the animals cannot enter. For the shrub, and cistus dominates this area. Cistus is a plant, if you go to southern Portugal, particularly Algarve, it's a plant that dominates the schist soils, and very often they form over 90% of the shrub and understory layer in many, particularly in these evergreen oak wounds, depending on the areas and on the soil types, of course, but they dominate in schist soils. And for the shrubs, we use both destructive sampling and phytovolume. So basically, you can cut some individuals, bring them to the lab, weigh them, and then you can relate the biomass with the volume of the shrub. And the next time you go to the field, you can just use measurements on phytovolume. You can measure height, diameter, canopy cover, and with that calibrate and estimate the biomass that is on the ground without cutting the individual. This is a view from the plots 12 years after exclusion. As you can see on the left, Joaquim Mendes, it's one of our research assistants, crucial person to maintain all this experiment. It's about 1.75 meters or so, and you can see how the shrubs, this is Cistus ladanifer, how high they are. So after 12 years, we could get individuals reaching like 4 meters high. While if you look to the right, this is on the front view is the control plot, and back on the ground you have the fenced plot. So here you see the shrubs, the average height here is like 70 centimeters, less density of shrubs, less biomass, and this was caused by the animal. So we can imagine that this ecosystem is very different from the ecosystem without the animals. So most of the results I'll be speaking here, they have been published. They are mostly in open source papers, and you can go there for any details that you may be interested on. So for example, here, this is based on a collaborator, PhD student, Xavier Leconte, who is now in France. When we measure the number of shrubs inside and outside the plot in different years, so here 2007 and 2013, that's what we get. So nothing very unexpected, but so the number of shrubs increasing within the fenced plots and decreasing outside the plots, meaning that the animals are controlling for the expansion and for the number of shrub individuals in the area. Here we have other parameters that we measured from the shrubs. So again, 2 different years, in this case 2007 and 2008. In black, you have the fenced plots. In gray, you have the open plots. And this first graph shows the number of seeds that we could find in protected and unprotected plots. And as you can see here, significant larger within the fenced plots. So the shrubs grow more, they produce more capsules, they produce more seeds, comparing with the shrubs outside that are being limited by deer feeding. Interestingly, the seed weight is also significantly different. So inside the fence, the seeds are larger and weigh more than the seeds outside. So the shrubs are able to develop better because they are not subjected to the animal predation. And of course, with that, the number of emerged shrub seedlings is also significantly larger inside the plots as compared to the outside plots. We measure the seed soil bank. In fact, an Italian collaborator, an Italian Erasmus student, Alessandro Olmi. So we brought soil samples to the greenhouse, and we've grown them, and we could record like 9 times higher seeds underground within the fence as compared to the outside and open plots. So it means that the animals are also changing the seed bank of this particular species, and of course others, but we were focusing our questions in this shrub. Well, this is another view of the data, but here with 3 years, so 2007, 2013, and 2015. Again, open plots, the white bars, the fenced plots, the gray bars, and the number of individuals is more or less the same outside, but they keep increasing, although they start to stabilize. So like the shrub is also reaching its carrying capacity, but again, much larger within the fence plot. And of course, biomass is carbon. So grossly about 50% of the plant biomass is is carbon. And when you estimate, and here I must strike, this is above ground carbon biomass, is dramatically higher inside the plot. And you could have already seen by the photograph, no need for these numbers, the amount of shrub biomass relates to a bigger amount of above ground carbon within the fence plot. So we could think here that the animals or the animal exclusion is contributing to a carbon stock storage. We contacted our colleagues that are experts in fire ecology and modeling, particularly Paul Fernandes, that is probably coming to the news again, because each time there is severe wildfires, Paul is in the news. Philippe Catry, that works with me in the Center for Applied Ecology, also a fire ecologist. And basically what these people do is, if we give them the vegetation parameters, vegetation height, vegetation biomass, plant species, they can use models to estimate different parameters and model fire occurrence. And that's what I have here, 3 different parameters. So the flame length, the fire line intensity, so the energy that the fire releases, and the speed that the fire propagates at different wind speeds, and again in fenced and open plots. So the fenced are the red squares, the open plots are the blue crosses. So when modeling using the vegetation parameters inside and outside the plots, that's the results you get. Again, dramatically different. If a fire occurs within those plots, the flame length will be much higher, much more intense, and much quicker spread, of course, increasing with the wind speed inside the fence areas. And also important to call attention is that in the fenced areas, when the wind speed increases, the surface fire can reach the bottom of the canopy. So I have this batch line here, about 1 meter and half, 1 meter and 30 centimeters, which is the average edge of the average height of the tree canopy in the study area. So to increase wind speeds, the flame length can reach the tree canopy, and the fire can change from a surface fire, which are usually not damage for the trees, to a crown fire. And if a crown fire occurs, the tree may die, and of course will lose all the carbon that is stored on it. So this is an important idea to retain, which I try to encapsulate with this when I draw this cartoon. So basically, you have above the system where the deer was excluded, so the fenced plots. You have higher shrub biomass, taller shrubs reaching the tree canopy. In the control plots, you have lower tall shrubs, much more spread, lower biomass. They don't touch the tree canopy. So if a fire occurs in the both system, it will be much severe. It can lead to a canopy fire and kill the tree, while here the deer are acting as a firefighter, indeed, sapador florestal. They are managing the vegetation, so if a fire occurs, it will be of lower intensity. And if the tree is able to survive, then we'll be having a large pool of above ground carbon stocks. And trees such as the holm oak or the cork oak, if you have a surface fire, the fire may damage the bottom of the trunk and will go on without killing the tree. But if you have a canopy fire, the tree may get killed, and all the carbon that is stored there will be lost. So we are facing a trade-off situation, and I like to call this attention, and Stefan showed very well. So the plus and the cons of rewilding approaches, everything, well, life is a trade-off. So we need really to consider the trade-off. So if we are in a fire-prone area with high wildfire hazard, maybe we prefer a situation like this. But usually, to have a situation like this, you need to have quite high grazing and browsing pressures. And if you have high browsing and grazing pressures, you may be having negative effects on oak regeneration. So here you are trading off wildfire hazard with oak regeneration, with oak conservation. And this is really a big debated issue, for example, in Natura 2000 areas. And we have been students working on this. Vasco Silva has done the PhD on that. We have habitats that we need to maintain because they are conserved due to their mixture of shrubs. But at the same time, they have a higher wildfire hazard. So the question here is, should we put the animals to reduce fire hazard? But with that, we may be losing structural diversity, and we may be losing some of the indicator species. So we will reduce the fire hazard, but also the conservation value of that habitat. Or shall we live with a higher wildfire hazard? And if a fire comes, the shrub formation will be completely lost, but the shrub is there with this Natura 2000 indicator species and the high conservation status on the ground. So these are really difficult questions, difficult decisions that the decision makers need to take. And we are here to give them the data and to use the data to fundament their decisions. All these questions became even more complex within climate change scenarios. So I took this graph from this paper from Scientific Reports, and you see here, so the reddish areas mainly refers to drought, very intensive drought periods here in Iberian Peninsula. You have these reddish curves that show the driest years that occur in the past in these areas, but also the wettest years. So we are dealing with uncertain, we are dealing with very much environmental variability. So we'll be having an increased frequency of severe droughts, but also an increased frequency of very intense rainy events. But when we look to the bottom part of the graph, you can see the periodicity of the droughts. 2012 was one of the worst of the last 50 years, but that means that we are entering a new term in our equation. So we don't have only the wildfire and the ungulates, we have the climate change scenarios, particularly drought. So we have all these interactions, drought, wildfire, and ungulates. And this becomes even and generates even more complex questions. For example, this graph shows how precipitation varied along the chronosequence in our study area. Sorry about this. So we implemented the fences in 2001, almost a quarter of a century ago. And in one way that's good because you can get all the meteorological series and you see the number of years where precipitation deviated negatively from the long-term mean. So that means that the plant communities there, the trees, the shrubs, of course the animals as well, are dealing with accumulated drought events. And also, as Stefan mentioned, ecosystems have memory, plants have memory. So this is important to note because that will affect plant responses, community response, and ecosystem responses to the animals. I like to show this example here, and I think, again, a picture is worth 1,000 words to illustrate the interactions that I'm telling you about. So this is a fence where on the right side, the animals do not enter. You can see the differences for the Cistus ladanifer is the same species. So again, taller, more green, more leaf, while here they are dead and brown or gray in this case. But what we noticed is that in dry years, in drought years, the shrubs outside have a significantly higher mortality than the shrubs inside the fence. So basically, they are dealing with the predator on one side, so they are dealing with the deer feeding on them, but they are also dealing with the drought and the lack of water. And they cannot cope with that. And they have a much higher mortality outside the fence as compared to the individuals inside the fence. So we also get mortality inside the fence due to drought, but it's significantly lower because they are only coping with drought, while outside the fence they are coping with drought and the animals, and that's too much pressure for them. And that's the main difference between these areas and where we can see these effects of exclosure. Also look to the grass. So we have more green, higher biomass when protected from the animals as compared to outside. And again, all this vegetation, and when it's dry, contributes to fire hazard. Is one of the parameters that the modelers enter in their equations is grass biomass, is the fine fuel that usually is the responsible for the fire to ignite and then propagate to the woody fuel. So the deer browsing, in addition to drought, increases shrub mortality outside the fence plot with higher accumulation of dead wood biomass. And of course, this has potential effects on wildfire hazard. So a dry and dead plant ignites much easier than a green plant. So again, there may be a positive effect on wildfire here because deer is contributing to dead shrubs on the ground, and that shrubs ignite much easier than green shrubs. And herbs, of course, are other fine fuel that is lower outside the fence due to deer grazing. And again, this is a typical effect from a mixed feeder. So they have effects on the grass biomass, they have effects on the shrub biomass. So I spoke about carbon and fire. Again, usually it's a trade-off. If you get more carbon, you also have higher wildfire hazard, and you need to decide what to do in these situations. But we had the visit of Brad Wilcox, so he's a professor at the University of Texas in USA, and he came with Pedro Leite, a postdoctoral researcher that works with Brad, and they are both eco-hydrologists. So, and what we did together, what we proposed to do was look to the water cycle, which we hadn't measured yet, inside and outside the browse plots. Pedro has developed a new method to estimate water infiltration. In a very simplistic way, these are cylinders where you put water, and then as faster as the water disappears, so you have a little tap here, as faster the water disappears, that means the higher is the infiltration rate in a particular area. These used to be done with long-term recording of the water level decreasing, but Pedro managed to do these things in automated way with electronic sensors, which became much easier. So basically, we established transects inside the fence and the open areas, and also in areas close to shrubs and further away from shrubs. In this work, we also had the benefit of other ongoing experiments on the study area, more related with the ecophysiology, but where they had to put fences to protect the apparatus they use for physiological measurements. And this allowed us to have a chronor sequence in terms of grazing and browsing exclusion from our original plots, 20 years of exclusion, to plots with 13 years of exclusion, plots with 7 years of grazing exclusion, and grazed areas, of course. So we did all these transits outside and inside the fences. You can see the fence there. But when inside the fence, we also did the measurements close or further away from the shrubs. And these are the results. So basically, let me first, we measure organic matter, the proportion of organic matter. We measure penetration resistance, so it's an indicator, a proxy of soil compactation, and also water infiltrability, so that the millimeters per hour that infiltrates in the soil. In grazed areas, in exposure with 7 and 13 years or 23 years, but also with this detail. So the measurements were done close or further away from a shrub. The main difference, of course, is the grazed areas. So much higher penetration resistance due to soil compactation from the animals compared to the exposures. So less infiltration in the control areas, but this effect is attenuated when you do the measurement close to a shrub. So this is a grazed area. When the measurement of water infiltration is done close to a shrub, it increases significantly. And also the penetration resistance decreases. So the roots of the shrub increases the soil aeration, increases water infiltrability, and this is translated in lower penetration resistance, although the amount of organic matter is not so much different. So in summary, we have these animals that with their presence, they completely change the ecosystem. They change, I didn't show here, but we have measurements on biodiversity. I can give a quick note. So particularly species, the grassland species composition changes dramatically. The legume species tend to be higher inside the fences. There were a master student monitoring invertebrate species composition. And again, they are not lower or higher in fence or outside the fences. They are just different. So the animals induce different invertebrate communities inside or outside the fence. So outside the fence, you have invertebrate communities that use open areas. Inside the fence plots, you have invertebrate communities that like biomass and more closed areas, more shade, and so on. The take-home message. So wild language, such as deer, strongly affects ecosystem functioning. The example here was Mediterranean oak woodlands, but there are amazing works done in other systems around the world. This has potential effects on water, fire, and carbon, and all these involves trade-offs. So this is not a black and white question and response. All these involves trade-offs that need to be carefully considered when we decide to go for animal reintroduction, be these species or other species, when we have these policies, decisions that need to be solidly grounded on data, and then the decision maker will decide. So, and that's a message that I usually really you to pay attention. And of course, management of wild ungulates need to incorporate this knowledge to anticipate effects on ecosystems, but very often these results, these effects are unexpected, are unanticipated, and frequently they may lead to lower conservation values. For example, if we exclude animals for a particular area, or if you don't manage a particular area and we allow share encroachment, in the end of the day, we may be losing habitat heterogeneity and we may be losing diversity. So all this needs to be carefully considered and paid attention. So just a very good thanks to our collaborators, all the PhD and MSc and Erasmus students and technicians that have been working with us. The funding has been mostly coming from Fundação para a Ciência e Tecnologia, quite a few projects that were approved there. And the study area, we have this long-term partnership. It's managed and known by this foundation, Fundação da Casa de Bragança, to whom we are very, very grateful as well. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm ready for some questions later on.
Thank you so much, Miguel. You'll have your questions in the end, okay? Let's now hear from Hedda. She's going to be our final speaker. She's going to talk, she's from Sylvester Rewilding, and she's going to talk to us about Galicia's wild horses and the ecological, cultural, and coexistence challenges and opportunities they present. So Hedda.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, I hope everyone can see it. Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to present in this really exciting webinar. As Deborah said, I'm going to focus on Galicia's wild horses and especially the cultural and human connection they have in the region and what opportunities and challenges this has for both humans, the ecology, and also rewilding or doing nature restoration with horses. Here. So first of all, a little bit about myself. Yeah, my name is Hedda. I'm a co-founder of Sylvester Rewilding, and I'm based here in Lisbon. My background from an academic perspective is in psychology and cognitive science. And I'm mainly working in project and partner management as well as community management with Sylvester Rewilding. So you might ask yourself, why is somebody from psychology and cognitive science in in a rewilding project like Sylvester? And I think there's many people, especially young people and people that are very affected by the climate crisis and biodiversity crisis, who become more and more aware of this and ask themselves, like, what can we actually do? What are possibilities we can do? And when I started to ask myself this question a lot and engage in the climate activism and restoration environment, I came a lot across George Monbiot. We had him already earlier in the presentation, but this is a quote I really like to share in presentations, which says that land use, he believes, is one of the most important of all environmental metrics. The land we use for extractive industries, of which farming uses by far the most, is land that can be used for ecological and carbon-rich ecosystems like wild forest, wetlands, and savannas. And I think it's a very powerful statement that inspired me a lot at that time, but it also threw up a lot more questions because, like, how can people that are not in the municipality level or in bigger projects actually restore land if that's such a powerful tool, if we don't have the means necessarily for it, access to land, but also money and education in a way. And this is when I started Sylvester Rewilding with a group of people that were asking themselves the same question. And what we do as a charitable association is to create wilderness areas, mainly on abandoned land in Europe. And these lands or these wilderness areas are collectively financed, but also collectively owned and governed. So we basically create communities around the land that help to finance the acquisition of the land, and then are also involved in the governing and rewilding process. You can imagine this a little bit like a digital commons structure. While regular commons used to be relatively popular in Europe, you find them only in a few places now, and this is kind of a digital version of it that tries to engage the local communities, but also a broader community of people that might not live in the specific area anymore, but are affected by it. So we are a very people-based approach, where we, as I said, try to incorporate especially local communities, extend on them and help them with tools to acquire the land and also to give them a governance structure or tool that helps them to manage the land and do rewilding on it in a way that really gives power to people that live locally, but also to everyone who contributed to the project and is interested in it. We do a lot of education and workshops, basically trying to connect expertise from professionals in the ecological and biological space with the people on the ground to help them do the rewilding work close to their places where they're actually living. So we have engaged in quite a range of workshops, some of them actually in Quinta do Pisão on the herbivores there, that were more like educational for the general public. But we're also engaged in more specific workshops to rewilding measures in communities that are actually practicing them. For example, how to remove eucalyptus and restore the native fauna and flora there. And that's one of our main projects in Galicia, which is a pilot project where we're employing this digital common structure on a 2 hectare eucalyptus plantation. And our goal there is to create a functional and resilient ecosystem, increase the biodiversity and habitat for natural species, while practicing all of this in like a community-led rewilding approach. So why you might be thinking like 2 hectares might be not enough to introduce horses, and that's correct. Like we're not directly working with any animal reintroductions or herbivores, or in this case horses, but Galicia actually has free or wild horses or free roaming horses, and they're mainly community governed or community owned. So this is kind of my connection to the following part, where we will dive deeper into the wild horses of Galicia and how they integrate into the cultural and ecological landscape. So Galicia has around 10,000 wild horses. The population is declining. As I said, they are considered wild, but they're actually free roaming. So all of them have owners. They're considered as livestock, but they live mainly free, roaming around all year round. The populations continue to decline, mainly to the reduced possibilities in traditional use, and also rural depopulation. So as many rural areas in Europe, we see large land abandonments. That was also touched upon in earlier presentations. People leave more to the cities and leave plots just to themselves, and vegetation actually grows wild, which is in a way really nice. But it also poses more challenges, especially when it comes to the relation of fire. In addition to these land abandonment, we also see in Galicia over the last years a huge spread of eucalyptus plantations as kind of a replacement of income for before small-scale farming. So we have abandoned land with wild roaming vegetation, and we have over 20% of Galician landmass covered in eucalyptus plantation, which really increases the fire risk in the region. And Galicia has seen some really severe fires over the last years, which become increasingly challenging for the population that still lives in the rural areas, but also for the bigger cities. Hence why the question of how to, first of all, tackle the eucalyptus plantations, but also how horses could be used or increased in these areas becomes really relevant. In regard to the horses, they have a really deep-rooted relationship between humans and the horses in Galicia for quite some time. There's rock carvings that date back to the Neolithic time that show the first time where humans started to really form a relationship with the horses, where they started to not just live next to them, but also start to round them up regularly to extract foals or horses for meat, but also for other products like using their manes for different horsehair products. This became over the years known as the Rapa des Bestes, where the people who owned the horses or who managed them, called besteiros in this region, annually round up the horses to maintain them, to extract products from them, basically. So the horses became really deeply rooted in the cultural heritage, livelihood, but also the way they were used for land stewardship. This has obviously changed over the years. The horses are still owned and managed mainly by besteiros that are integrated in common land communities. So what we are trying to set up in like a different digital, locally rooted way with our rewilding, Silvestre Rewilding project still exists in smaller forms in Galicia, where they have common land communities that are now really small, but actually own common land and govern it as common land, which is, if you look at different common land communities around Europe, not so popular anymore. Some still own common land, but they're not technically governed as such. Also, the Rapa des Bestes continues. So within these communities, the horses are still round up annually. Not really to extract the foals for meat production anymore, because there's a very, it doesn't really make sense on the market. People get too little money for the meat. And also horse mane products are not really an economic opportunity anymore. So the cutting of the mane is mainly for parasite management and more a cultural relict of these practices. And during these roundups, what people do is usually vaccinate the horses, deworm them, see what the condition of the horses is to basically maintain them. Most communities keep the horses because of a cultural tradition, as these kind of Rapete Pestes is like a kind of big event every year. The one in Sabudeco, which is the biggest one in Galicia, is actually happening this weekend. But also they use the horses for specific landscape management practices, especially the people who still own cattle, use them with the cattle together to open paths for grazing, as the horses go in Galicia a bit more into the scrubby areas than the cattle do, and they can maintain the pastures more open. So they're actually aiding the few people that still have cattle in the management areas. And we see now, since a few years, actually some common land communities reintroducing herds or trying to reintroduce the herds and the horses to use them specifically for the ecological benefits and for the fire management practices. We heard a lot about the ecological benefits already in the previous presentations, so I'm just going to go a bit more superficial over them, which were actually looked at and studied in Galicia in the areas where there are wild horses. And it shows that they do really help control the scrubs. The horses in Galicia have kind of this moustache around their mouth, which allows them to eat more the thorny and scrubby bits. And they do go into these abandoned lands and actually reduce the biomass under the trees, which is a big help for reducing the wildfire risk, because these works, if not done by the horses, need to do manually. So next to reducing the fire risk, the horses also allow to reduce actually the vegetation management costs quite significantly in the areas where they're introduced. As I said, they're still used for cattle pasture and in that relation to help manage these environments. They have some benefits for the support of biodiversity and carbon storage, and they also contribute to the preservation of the heathlands and the peatlands in Galicia, which have become more and more difficult to sustain because of the takeover of eucalyptus, but also these wildly growing scrubs that became very difficult for the few communities that still live around to actually manage with human power, basically. There's also a lot of challenges around these horses, and they've been declining for a reason over the years, which is, first of all, that as we also heard in the presentation before from Stefano, that horses count towards livestock. So also in Galicia, they cannot be completely free, and they fall under the CAP European legislation. So they need to be vaccinated, taken care of, and maintained regularly. But also they fall under this subsidy scheme, where they're kind of livestock, but they don't really get subsidized, except it's like rare breeds. On the other hand, they provide really little income. As I said, these past economic benefits of having the horses for meat and hair products isn't really there anymore. You have relatively high wolf kills, especially in the foal, the baby horse range. So where you have some bastados losing up to 30% of their foals during the year. This is, again, as we've seen also in previous presentations, always with two sides of the coin. At the one hand, you lose a lot of horses due to the wolf predation, but then on the other hand, some people also value the horses for this because they might prevent actual livestock attacks. But in general, these horses, to main them as a common community or as a bastado, is a huge financial and administrative burden. While there's also challenges with the social acceptance. The horses go into the eucalyptus plantations and into pasture lands and gardens and actually cause damage, which can produce a lot of resistance against the horses. There's also the risk of road accidents, which are not properly insured, or the insurance situation is not so clear, which is both a challenge for the person having the accident, but also for the horse manager. And then finally, we have this huge loss of grazing space due to the spread of eucalyptus that actually increases the pressure of the horses, changing their grazing behavior, going more into spaces that they previously didn't really go to, which are maybe managed for pastures or different how do you say, different management schemes, and cause damage there. This has led to people trying to maintain the horses more, fencing them more, which also then led to a shift in behavior of the horses due to the fencing, and they don't really show their full benefits they can have on the landscape and had before. Still, there is a lot of opportunities with the horses being community managed, specifically in this scheme like they have in Galicia, which is first of all that the communities could care or do care for the horses over a longer extended period of time. First of all, because it's tradition, but also because they connect more with the horses. So horse care or animal care could go beyond the project timeline, which actually already a system in place and a tradition in place that could be used to care for the animals beyond a specific project introduction, for example. The communities could also help to provide greater acceptance of the horses because they're more integrated, people know more what they're about, and there's a bigger group of people that are also non-professionals who can communicate the value of the horses and who might also depend on the horses. As I said earlier, there's a huge reduce of fire management costs and labor, which could save the municipalities a lot of money and could potentially be money that could be directed to actually the horse owners in maintaining the horses and having them as kind of an ecosystem service. These projects or these communities usually also really empower citizen science and the inclusion of people of the communities and the surroundings and the monitoring and the stewardship of the horses, which can also increase the acceptance of the horses. And also communities have a different way of knowledge transfer. I mentioned this earlier that information on how to restore and how to take care of landscapes can be really locked up these days in a very academic scene, and people who just grow up in a city doing their day-to-day desk job, they're very far from these knowledge parts, and it's relatively difficult for them maybe to access information from a scientific paper. So having these knowledge transfer from the community to further generations and other communities can be a very helpful way to spread horse management practices and ideas. And then finally, why community management of areas in general could be a really powerful solution to rewilding or opportunity for rewilding, but also especially for horse management, is the flexibility and adaptability of the people that are really close to the environment. You have basically the community monitoring on a more regular basis, being more able to adapt to changes that might occur in the landscape. Well, as I said, opportunities and challenges are there. So what kind of needs to change on the ground? As we saw earlier in the presentation of Stefano as well, is there needs to be a lot of legal structures that are adapted. It's a huge challenge for the communities to actually deal with cat policies and also livestock policies because they don't really represent what is actually the value of the horses in this setting and how they are managed. So having the horses represented in a legal structure as ecosystem service, especially, for example, for fire management and biodiversity increasement, could be really valuable to actually facilitate the introduction and usage on the ground. Payment to the communities is a huge issue because, as I said, most people these days hold the horses purely for historical value or for ecosystem restoration purposes, which are not really paid for. As I said earlier, this could be an opportunity to pay from the money that is saved by not having them to spend on human labor to people who actually hold the horses. One area that is really interesting is the fencing and the confinement of the horses to not enter spaces. Fences are usually really expensive for the communities and difficult to maintain, as also Barbara and Bruno showed that fences are damaged and sometimes just taken down. There's ideas of to explore virtual fencing opportunities, which might be cheaper and easier to maintain over an extended period of time. And then finally, to implement some sort of compensation and insurance scheme for horses creating damage or having road accidents, so that there's a clear compensation structure both for the horse owner but also the person affected of what happens if horses roam further or actually create some damage. Yeah, so to round it up, I hope I could give a little bit of an introduction on how horses or wild horses in Galicia are currently integrated in the culture and in the ecosystem, and what type of challenges and opportunities this could face for expanding this as a rewilding practice and a land management practice, especially for the prevention of wildfires or the management of wildfires. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Heather. So now let's go to our Q&A session. I'm going to share my presentation so that if you haven't yet, you can go to Slido and submit your questions. I think most of you have. We've had a lot of participation in Slido, but if you haven't, you can do it now. Now let's see. No, sorry. Let's see. I'm going to share the Slido screen, okay? So that all of you can see which questions we have there and which ones have been most voted. I'm going to try to begin with, so that everyone can speak, to pose 1 or 2 questions for each speaker. And then, well, if we still have some time, we can do more questions for each one. So maybe, I think this first question, the most voted one, was for Bruno, because it's been here since the beginning. So Bruno, do you envision a future where in the long term, herbivores in the natural park could roam more freely without needing as much human management or fencing? What do you think?
I think it's possible. At the present, the only wild species that we have is the wild boar that came naturally, but we are developing a project for the reintroduction in the wild for the roe deer. And I don't know what's the future. Could release also the red deer, but that's not in a study present.
So, and what about, are there any plans to expand your functional herbivory project to other areas?
Yes, we have 2 areas that we are implementing the functional herbivory plan, but we are all studying for 3 other areas, and we intend 3 other areas that they are managed by us, and we also intend to replicate this project to private owned lands.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so, well, we have one here for Miguel. Miguel, which indicators do you think are most effective for tracking ungulate presence effects at the landscape level from all of those you mentioned?
Well, there are, do you mean effects on vegetation? Is not clear in the question.
Yes. Sorry.
Yeah, so one of the most used ones is look to the vegetation that is being used by the animal. And if we have an idea on how palatable the species is, if we start seeing non-palatable species being eaten, that is giving us an idea that probably we're already reaching the carrying capacity or maybe slightly above it. In terms of animal presence, well, there's many. So feces accumulation is a good indicator for habitat use. You can use tracks, but again, this is just an indicator of habitat use. And nowadays, camera tracking, GPS, all that new technology, well, not so new anymore, but you have very different ways to monitoring wildlife populations.
Okay, so Barbara, are you there? Can you hear us? Maybe not. So let's see if there's any other questions for Stefano or Miguel or Heda before we go to the second round. Okay, one more for Barbara. Stefano, are you there? Can you hear us?
I am now. I hope you can hear me.
How do you think we can reconcile rewilding strategies with the traditional land uses and human activities that define cultural landscapes?
Oh, I think it is very complicated anyway, and it requires a long-term activity. But I think there are opportunities, even for the local communities, to work with rewilding. The first opportunity, it is very clear, while the traditional activities may be poorer and poorer and less interesting from their economics, tourism can be very important, can represent a resource, and of course a rewilding landscape can be much more interesting than a landscape lacking animals. So this is a point of use, a point to stress, but it is clear that there are contradictions between rewilding and the activity of local people, as I have mentioned in my talk. In fact, this is an important issue which could be solved in part by fund transferring to the local communities by the richer part of the country. We are in a situation where the big amount of money is made in towns. In fact, it's made in the bank, playing with stocking rate, this kind of stuff. That these people should pay for people which stay in the countryside.
Thank you, Stefano.
Deborah, are you listening?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So
Okay.
it's
We have
working.
one more for Stefano and Miguel, and
Yeah.
then we'll go back to you.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yes. Okay. Okay.
So, Stefano, we have here rewilding using native and wild relative species, Garrano and Suhaya horses and Maronese as proxies instead of bringing in Taurus, Przewalski horse.
Okay.
Well, it's not well.
I have to say that domesticated animals are not wild animals. Even if they look like, they are not the same thing. For instance, anti-predatory behavior of a domesticated animal is quite different from anti-predatory behavior of a wild animal, even if it's the same species or very close species. And this can cause problem. For instance, the avoidance of the fear of people can be different between domesticated and wild specimen. And this can imply important difference in management. Basically, I don't believe that I don't feel that domesticated animals can be used really for rewilding. They can accomplish some task we expect from wilderness, but they are not the same thing. They have been modified in the course of 5,000 years or something like that, or 8,000 years by men to adapt these people to their need. And simply they cannot put back in the wild and say, okay, remember what your great father was doing, because it doesn't work like that. For this reason, I would like much more to use the Asiatic wild ass instead of donkeys or asses. We have in Italy, like as in Spain, a large number of local race for that animals, because they are not really the same. If an ass go near the people, it's finished. It's not more useful for a wild for me.
Thank you so much, Stefano, for your perspective. So, Miguel, we have one more here for you. Any studies that evaluates the interconnection grazer-browser in the process of ecological restoration, landscape modeling, and vegetation pressure?
Quite a complex question. I don't know if I got it clear, but I can mention that, for example, we are now involved in Portuguese, I would just call it adensamento of montado. Nowadays, you call it restoration. So it's, you know that the cocoolans are suffering high mortality. So there are areas that really are in need of intervention. They are in need of reforestation or restoration, whatever you want to call it. And so we went ahead with this project. It's an Interreg project. We had a team of master students doing different monitoring at the site. And we thought, okay, our main challenge will be the wild boar, because they will be eating these pre-germinated acorns that were taken to the field. In the end, the main predator were the rodents. So any pre-germinated acorn that was put on the ground, maybe over 80% of them disappeared. So again, is all this question of trade-off. So we need to put trees in areas where the tree mortality is high. So we went to go on to these reforestation or restoration projects. We want the wild species, but some of these wild species are also tree predators, are also acorn predators. And it was really a big change of focus. So the students, they put camera traps in the field to record the wild boar. Not much wild boar, but lots of rodents affecting this, what we can call it a restoration project. And just another idea related not to this question, but what have been said before, that I usually like to strike. Our cultural landscapes have conservation value. We should not forget about that, particularly in the Mediterranean region, where we have thousands of years of human use and human influence. Many species have adapted to these disturbances. Over here in Portugal, the examples I like to give is in southern Portugal, these extensive cereal fields that are being used by the great bastards. They are maintained by farmers. So the day where the farmers get out of there, we'll be having the ecological succession. So the shrubs will come, the habitat will change, and the great bustard, this beautiful bird, will be living away. Another very good example, I think, is a fantastic example, is the Iberian lynx. So this has been a huge effort from the Institute of Nature Conservation at the time that the president, Tito Rosa, it was over 2 years of discussions and public participation, different stakeholders, involving environmental NGOs, academy, foresters, farmers, and the hunters. And finally, the lynx start to be reintroduced. But the lynx, the most favorable areas for their introduction is in southern Portugal, in the Parque Natural do Val de Guadiana, in fact, in touristic hunting zones. And this seems a paradox, but what happens there is that the people there are managing their lands for small game hunting. So they create pastures for the rabbits, they create cover for the rabbits, they introduce vaccinated rabbits because the diseases, myxomatosis and calcivirus, are very high, cause high mortality in the rabbits. And so because they wanted the rabbit to hunt, they managed the land to have rabbits. So these were the areas that had enough rabbit density for the Iberian lynx, which is a specialist predator. Over 90% of its diet is based on rabbit. So the lynx start to be introduced in touristic hunting zones. So you can imagine it was a big amount of work working with these people. And while some years ago, although the lynx was officially extinct in Portugal, there were occasional sightings, but these people wouldn't tell anything, because if they said, I saw a lynx in my area, the next day, probably they would be restricting their activities. And nowadays, I am very proud in saying that the Iberian lynx has returned to their areas. The Iberian lynx was downgraded from critical endangered, then to endangered, and nowadays is classified as vulnerable. And also the main cause of death, car traffic, are negatively affecting the population. But just these remarks, because cultural landscapes have conservation value. And again, this is a trade-off. Shall we let them to go abandoned and we'll lose it? Of course, we'll get other species, large predators, or try in some way maintain it. And of course, this is a very important socioeconomic question that needs to be dealt in rewilding issues. Sorry, I took so long.
No, thank you. You answered the question. So now, Barbara, I think this the most voted one here now can be for you. So can you discuss the use of Mironesa cows feeding on acacia and whether we can scale this approach to other affected areas? Bruno can also say something after you.
Yeah, with the acacia, we need to be careful because our cows are in the enclosure where they are in the moment is about 3 acres, so it's relatively small, and we need to test it in a bigger enclosure if the impact is the same, because we don't know if they are eating acacia because they don't have the preference vegetation they will eat, or if it's actually a predation on acacia. So yeah, we need it needs to be tested. Of course, they will eat it. I don't know if they will only eat that on a bigger scale that we want to end the acacia invasive species. So probably yes, but it still needs to be studied more carefully. Yeah.
Thank you, Barbara. So now I think this one can go to Hedda. What is your vision about rewilding in Europe? Do you think this is going to generalize itself? Do you believe in synergies between human and nature?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think Europe has a lot of potential for rewilding, but we do have the challenge that there are so many people living in Europe and that we cannot create huge wilderness areas. So I think the challenge is really like, how do we get people on board, communities on board that live, first of all, remote in these landscapes that are to be rewilded, but also how do we get support from people that moved away from these spaces to the cities where we have more economic opportunities, but that are also really depending on the rewilding around. If we manage to get like a good connection between people and nature in Europe again, that has like is based in tradition and how like the people are living in the lands, but also sees a very new and different way on how to live within Europe while we're having, for example, large predators roaming around again, learning to live with them. Then I think it's definitely possible. But yeah, I think that's one of the bigger challenges we're facing. So there needs to be a lot of work done on the human side, much more, I think, compared to landscapes or like bigger countries like America, where you have much more like space without humans.
Thank you, Heather. Let me see if I can find some other question for you. Let me just see. What lessons from Galicia can you think can be applied to other regions where herbivores could act as landscape managers? Like here.
Yeah. I think for Lisbon area, which is very urban, I think to still incorporate people into the process and bring them to the places and have them see the horses and build some connection to the area and to the animals that live there, is something that you see in the rural areas and the rural communities of Galicia, that the people are super aware of the animals, they care for them. I think this will not be really able in the Lisbon setting, so it will still be a management of Quinta do Pisão and Cascais Ambient, but to still get the people in to build a relationship with the animals is something that I think Cascais Ambient and Quinta do Pisão is already doing really well, but that should still be maintained and focused on, so people know if I walk my dog there, I cannot let it off the leash, for example. And all of these things to really incorporate also the people that live really close by the project and further away. And then I think in general, the idea of common land management with communities is something that sounds so futuristic and absurd sometimes, but there is also common land in Portugal, in other areas of Europe, and it's these days not so much managed as commons anymore, but to try to rebuild these structures and experiment with the idea to also bring people into the decision-making process and into like managing what is going on around them in the nature areas could be an opportunity that I definitely see, especially in the more remote parts of Portugal, for example, in the north, where you do have common land and where you do have also still a little bit more of these feral wild animal structures in place. Not as extreme as Galicia, but I think it's still close enough to pick it up there and try to see how can we improve this and make it work in 2025, basically.
Okay, thank you so much, Ed. I saw somebody asking about the slides. If we are going to ask to share the presentations, we are going to share ours, and we are going to ask our speakers to send theirs as well, so that we can share everything in our site. But also, the webinar was recorded, and we'll be sharing it in our YouTube channel and in our site. So you will also be able to access it in this way. So Barbara, I ask you if you can check the chat. There's a question for you there, if you are able to answer it in the chat. About Slido, let's continue to go in order. So next question, will there be any reintroduction of predators such as the Iberian lynx? I think this one was for Bruno and Barbara.
At the moment, we don't have any projects for the reintroduction of predators due to the problems that they can cause with the local community. But in the future, we can't tell. It would be good, but for now, it's not a possibility.
And what about surplus grazing animals? Could they be relocated to local national parks or reserves instead of being culled?
Yes, it could be done, but the problem is for us to catch the red deer and roe deer. It's a very difficult process, and the stress it causes, we will have to use bombas or some kind of structures like that. And it's a much more easy and solution to do the culling, and the expenses also affected, because to translocate the animals to a national park, who would pay for that translocation? We are a company that is ruled by the Cascais municipality, and it would have to be protocols with the ICNF to do that. But for us, it would be much better to translocate the animals and not needing to do a culling.
Barbara, do you believe that animals living as wild with their natural social relationships have a different ecological impact?
Yeah, of course. For social behavior, wild animals learn from their mothers how to behave, and being a domesticated animal, usually humans tend to alter these connections with the mothers and with their peers, so they don't live in herds, for example. Normally they live alone, or live in herds for some time and then go to do work for the humans. And sometimes it alters dysfunctions this social behavior. Also, I didn't mention in the presentation, but we have cases where the mothers abandon their offspring, and so we have to feed them so that they can feed themselves. And you could ask, oh, why then you don't put these animals when they grow up and they start feeding themselves? Why don't you put it in the wild with the other herds? And that's why, because they don't have the teachings of their mother, so they don't know what's good to eat. They will eat randomly. They probably will depend more on supplementation feeding. And also they wouldn't know, we try to put them with adult horses, but it's domesticated, so they will always be friendly towards people, so they wouldn't be afraid, so they will interact more with people. And this is a problem. We want them to have, like Stefano said, a fear-based also about humans and the wild. So yes, it will be very different.
Okay, so let's just ask one more question. let's see. I think this one was for Barbara maybe as well.
Okay.
I don't know. It's not identified, but invertebrates, it's not really your area, but
No,
you
but I can try.
she knows the guy who studies the invertebrates around here. So does the increase in plant species richness due to grazing significantly increase biodiversity of invertebrates?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Invertebrates like dung, and animals do a lot of dung. And by eating all the plants, they attract this. That's why we don't use also a parasite. We don't deworm our animals, so the dung is more clear of this, so attract the invertebrates. And probably, I don't know this, my colleague probably would be a better person to answer this, but probably the type of plants that they eat, they also influence the animals that the dung attracts. And also, if the plant richness is increasing, they will attract obviously more butterflies, more insects, pollination, and so on. So yeah.
Okay, so thank you all for all your questions. We stuck to the most voted ones. We don't have time to do all of them. So now I ask João to give us some final remarks about today's webinar. And I thank you all so much for being with us and for contributing to this subject and for showing us incredibly interesting presentations and for all your questions and for your time, and I hope you enjoyed it. So now, João, up to you.
Okay, thank you, Deborah, and thank you also. I think it was a very well balanced presentation. All the speakers brought different perspectives for the field, for historic perspective, and also for some studies that we are managing. And thank you very much for all the inputs. So I think we covered a lot of different perspectives, and still there's a lot of questions that we should keep on working. So the most important is in fact that rewilding, it's a concept that we should and keep on developing. Nevertheless, there are many other possibilities that we can use herbivores in the landscape. There's a lot of knowledge to be acquired regarding the impact, the management, and in particular the coexistence, not with predators, but I think one of the big challenges is the coexistence with urbans, with people who need to really relearn how to understand wildlife and how can we live with wildlife around our community. So this is the main takeover, and it's what we are indeed trying to do here in the Sintra Cascais National Nature Park and with the Cascais municipality. So thank you very much for attending. Thank you very much for the speakers and their time. Thanks for the team that all around support us and make this happen, Deborah and all the rest of the colleagues in particular. And please follow the projects, give inputs, and I believe any other issue or question you would like to have to make to the speakers, you can use Deborah to keep on and sharing the presentations. Okay, thank you very much.